This episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is brought to you by the Rare Breeds Pigeon Club, an international organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the world's rarest pigeon breed. The RBPC works to protect genetic diversity, support fanciers around the globe, and keep these unique breeds from fading into history. You can learn more about their mission, explore their full rare breed list, or become a member by visiting rarepigeons.net. Check them out and help support the future of rare pigeons worldwide. Welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast, brought to you by the All About Pigeons nonprofit organization, which is dedicated to promoting education and promotion of the pigeon hobby. Every week, a listener requests to drive our conversations about all things pigeons. Join me, Philip Fry, as we learn and share stories about these incredible birds and this ancient hobby. Today, we're going to be talking about pigeon whistles, the type of whistles that you put on the pigeon, not the kind that you're calling them in with. Talking with us about that, we have with us from Barcelona, Nathaniel Mann. So, Nathaniel, thanks for coming on and talking with us.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm really happy to talk. You'll find that once I get going, you'll struggle to stop me. So
Perfect.
become like everybody in the pigeon world, become a bit of a geek about this stuff.
You have done some pretty neat things with pigeons and the whistles that go on their back, but can you tell us a little bit about your own background with pigeons, how you got into them, and how you got started with them?
So I'm a composer and musician. I look into a lot about folklore in Great Britain. So I'm in Barcelona, but I'm actually British. So I've only been here for a couple of years. But so a lot of my work is to do with sound and how sound exists within the history of music, not rather than music itself. And as part of that, I got a residency as composer in residence at the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is one of the Oxford University museums. It's an incredible museum, like a couple of 100 years old, and it's an ethnographic and world archaeology museum, and it's filled with objects and artifacts from all across the world, from each and different culture and different time periods. And what's unique about the museum is that the way it's organized. So it's not organized by time period or by geography. It's organized by what it is. It's actually organized by the solution, the common solutions. It gives the unique solutions to the common problems that humans face. It's organized by types of money. It's organized by different kinds of knitting. It's organized by different sound makers. So obviously within sound makers we have musical instruments, and this is where what I was interested in. And as my invitation was to explore and respond to the instruments in the collection, and there was only one set of instruments that I struggled to imagine the sound of, and that was the pigeon whistles. So there's actually three cases of Chinese pigeon whistles on display, and to give your listeners an idea, I mean, this is a museum. It's quite dark in there, because they keep the lights low for the preservation of all these incredible objects they've got from around the world, and it's absolutely packed. It's not a very clean white cube with a few objects in it. It's rammed full of curiosities, and everywhere you look there's something. So there was actually people who worked in the museum who'd never seen the pigeon whistles before, despite the fact that there's actually three cases of them. They're rather small cases, but they're kind of high up on a column, and yeah, they're if I don't know if you've seen some. Well, you've mentioned before that you've seen some of the Chinese pigeon whistles. They're incredible. They're beautiful little objects made out of gourds and bamboo poles, and they resemble kind of little, almost gargoyle-like faces, with these wide gaping mouths and little eyes. And so there's these clutches behind a glass in a glass case, peering down at me, and I just couldn't imagine what that sounded like. So I set about. Well, I found a few references. I started investigating it. I found a few references to recordings of it, but they were very hard. This was 2012, I think, 2011. So there wasn't as much on the internet about pigeon whistles as there is now. Yeah, I couldn't find any examples. So I thought the only way that I'm going to know what this sounds like is if I get some pigeons. So that's how it kind of started out, and I was invited to take part as a part of an exhibition of sound art of all different kind of sound artists who make sculptures which blow in the wind, and it was called Audible Forces. It's all about giving voice to the wind. And as our pigeons, that was my contribution to this show. I kind of signed myself up to the show, saying I can do this, but without having any pigeon whistles and without having any pigeons and without having any clue about how to do it really. So my starting point was that.
So where did you wind up getting pigeons from?
First thing I did was put out some adverts in Homing World. So at the time, obviously your podcast listeners know all about rollers and tumblers and fancy pigeons. And, as a layman who didn't know anything about pigeons at all, I'd never heard of any of those terms. So my default in the UK, I think the biggest thing that people know about homing pigeons, racing pigeons. So my initial thought was to find some pigeon fanciers, and so I put an advert out in Homing World with my phone number in, kind of saying I'm looking for somebody to work with me on pigeon whistles. And I started to get phone calls from pigeon fanciers all across the country, most of them telling me this will never work, you can't do it.
Oh no.
And and nobody kind of willing to actually even try until I think two of them, and I can't remember who they are now. They both spoke to me about a chap called Pigeon Pete. And they were like, there's this one guy, Pigeon Pete, and maybe he's the guy you want to speak to. And so I got wind of him and managed to get his phone number. And basically he was famed because he was training up his Birmingham Rollers. He was training them up to fly from a kit box on the back of a scooter. So I don't know if you use the same terminology in the States, but like a little motorbike. Do you call that a scooter?
Yep, same thing.
Okay. Yeah, like a mod 60 scooter. Like I normally call it a moped, but he tells me off if I call it a moped. So it's a scooter. And so he'd have a box on the back of that, and he was training his pigeons to be able to release them wherever he drove to. So he could drive out to any field and basically release them, and they'd fly up, they'd do their tumbling, and then come back to the kit box on the back of his bike. And as far as I know, he's the only person in the UK doing this. I've seen stuff that people in the States have done it with big lorries that drive out into the middle of nowhere and have done it, but I've never seen anyone else in Europe doing it. And so I managed to reach out to him, and I was living in London at the time, and he's up in Nottingham. And he was just up for it. Pete's an amazing guy. He was a steeplejack, and factory worker in Nottingham. And when I met him, he was just deep into the pigeon world, into the Birmingham roller competitions and stuff. And he was just up for trying it. So we that was one thing I had sorted, was the pigeon side. Well, I mean, I've cut that down quite a lot. And then I had to get some whistles. So the whistles themselves, the museum wouldn't let me touch their artifacts. Of course, they wouldn't even let me blow in them. And at the time, it was impossible to get any from China. I mean, I don't speak Chinese. I didn't, and they're very hard to get hold of even now. So I went about trying to make some, and I made some out of just recycled found materials. So bits of an ice lolly stick, some bits of a cut up vinyl record. It was actually a Christa Berg record, and some old film pots. I don't know if you remember the 35 millimeter film.
Oh yeah, the old cases for the film.
Yeah, so just those little kind of semi-transparent pots, and I worked out how I could make pigeon whistles out of those. And they're very simple compared to the ones, the traditional Chinese ones, which are made by master artisans and incredible works of art. Mine are absolutely blasphemy in the face of that. They're, but it worked, and I could get, whereas the Chinese ones, some of them have up to 40 notes, 40 individual flutes, tiny
Wow.
flutes on one pigeon. Mine only had one note, one pigeon, but you got to start small and see where you end up. So Pete and I started getting together and trying out the pigeons, and there was a big concern, like how are they going to respond to it? How are they going to? Is this cruel? it was a big question that people ask, this sound on their back as they're flying around. And Pete's someone who loves his birds dearly. And he said to me, if there's any sign that they're not happy, well, I'm not going to go ahead. I'm going to pull out of this. And, um, and after the first couple of tests, when we had an actual, a kit with about seven whistles on at once, he said, "I think they're enjoying it. I think I think they're enjoying it. They seem to be flying in a slightly different way, and I think they're playing with the sound." And he was completely enamored with it and completely taken with it.
Oh, that's cool.
That's how the collaboration really started. So it's always been a collaborative project with me doing the sound side and the whistles, and Pete dealing with the birds.
The traditional way they always did with the gourds and everything, and the breed that they used back in China was the nasal tuft pigeons, right? I'm pretty sure that
Okay.
was like one of the breeds that they used a lot of the times. And we've joked about it in the past about we need to get some of those whistles and put them on Birmingham Rollers because we're like when they start rolling, it's going to start making a really wild sound. Did any of his birds roll, and did the sound would it change when they would roll?
Basically what we ended up doing, because he didn't want to use his best rollers for this, as you can imagine, that
Oh,
is.
okay.
So what we ended up I mean, they did roll, and when they're rolling it didn't make much sound. I mean, I like you imagined it would be amazing, but it didn't make much sound anyway. So he bred a bunch of birds for me, and we ended up training them from, so they were super comfortable with them, and we trained a kit from squabs specifically for this. And so he wasn't training them for, he was training them both things at once, in terms of the portable, the portable kit box, and also to be flying with the whistles. But we trained them from their first flights, basically, with both of those things in mind. And they were not selectively bred or trained for rolling. But they would still fly in the figure of eight and return to the place where we released them from, which is what we were looking for. Because eventually we ended up touring this as a performance, and we presented it on Brighton Beach, we presented it outside Salisbury Cathedral, in the Lake Districts, which is this huge mountainous and a district up in the UK, in the north of the UK, full of incredible lakes. I think there are nine different spots around England. Greenwich Park in London, Salford, in just outside of Manchester. So we spent a year touring this round, and I would sing songs about pigeons and about pigeon culture, and tell them the story of the pigeon whistles, and where they came from, and take the audience on a walk through to a kind of an outdoor space with enough space to release the birds and to lie down on the ground, and invite people to lay on the ground and listen and watch. The beautiful thing for me, the magic, was the moment they would pin out. Um, and they'd, when they go up so high and they disappear, but and you can't hear them anymore, but that the music is still up there in the clouds. And that was really magical for me. That was that's where the buzz was for me, when they pinned out, and you just knew that it was up there, still resonating, still singing out, but no one could hear it. And then they'd come back one by one, and so kind of yeah, just drift down and drift back into the kit box. Yeah, it was a magical thing.
How many birds was flying when you were doing your presentations?
We'd have 14.
Oh, okay. And that sound, I mean, I've seen videos of it. I've never heard a flock flying with it. Is there anything, I mean, on the videos and stuff, it almost sounds kind of eerie. What would you liken that sound to? What would like be a way to describe that sound?
That's the thing about the sound, is you cannot record it, because it's moving around you, and there are no microphones and speakers that can really give you that sense of movement, and that sense of height, and that sense, the depth, and it doesn't translate well to recordings. But you use the word eerie. It is eerie. It's eerie, and it's really pervasive. And so it's strangely, you can hear it from a long way away. It travels really well, I guess, because there's nothing in the air. There's nothing to stop the sound, nothing to bounce the sound. It's just traveling, the line of sight, line of flight. It's what happens is you're hearing the bird's flight translated into sound. So you're hearing the relationships as they move. You're hearing them, how they kit and how they. I don't know the word for separate again, and so you'll hear it's kind of like a translation of the beauty of that flight into sound. I mean, I recommend anyone trying it, trying to get hold of some whistles. These days on eBay, you can get hold of some plastic whistles quite easily on eBay.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything when you were talking about making some. I was like, well, I did get some on eBay. But
Yeah,
I
but
mean, you got to be pretty proud of yourself. That's a pretty impressive feature right there. I mean, you made your own. That's impressive, really.
well, yeah, I mean, but back then there was none on eBay. Come on. Back then there was none on eBay, and I ended up I did another round where I 3D printed them as well. There's a great guy in Germany called Uli Wahl. He's got an incredible website called Wind Music, and he does all kinds of Olu music. He's also worked with pigeon whistles, and he makes his own out of snail shells and ping pong balls and all kinds of. It's definitely worth checking him out as well. Yeah, have you flown them yourself?
I
Have you
only
picked
bought
them
a
up?
couple and I loft fly homers and stuff. And so when I put them on there, I could hear it when it was going around, but I didn't. I needed to get like 20 years, I needed to get that. And I wanted, and the ones they had that I saw on eBay, they were all the same note. And like you were saying before, like the gourds and the ones that they were making traditionally, they had this big range, and that's how you would get the really unique sound, like you said, like the depth and stuff, when you would have all these different notes playing at the same time. But I mean, it did sound really cool, just even having one or two of them on there.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't think I ever reached the heights of the what I imagine it would be like in China. I mean, still today, like I know that for certain festivities or ceremonies, they still fly. There's not many artisans still making them. There's a few, and they still fly pigeon whistles on certain events. And I'd love to hear that. I haven't heard it myself. And what I got, what I managed to do, I think it was a pale representation of that, but I also used it to accompany. So I would sing to it and sometimes invite musicians to perform to it, and violin and flute, and use it as a kind of bit of a duet with the pigeons as well to balance out that to add that extra depth that you're talking about as well.
Oh, that's neat to add the instruments with it as well. What were some of the reactions that you were getting from the people when you're doing your presentations?
I mean, you get everything. You get some people who just think, "Oh, these guys are, what are they on?" But somebody said it's the closest thing I've heard to heaven, or have seen to heaven. And I think some people are, were genuinely moved by it. I was always moved by it. There's something, like I say, that translation of flight into sound. It's like drawing lines of music across the sky. It does something. It you feel it in your gut, and it's a bit magical.
So you definitely traveled quite a few different places. How long were you doing these presentations for?
So there was like a year of traveling around. I think we did 8 or 9 of them, and then we did, like I say, later on. I think in 2019, or no, 2017 maybe, we did a few more things with the 3D printed pigeon whistles. Um, So it was over a period of, no, let me think. We first did it in 2013 and then did it again in something like 2015 or 2016 or something. So it was a few years of activity. But for me, this is also, it's not something that I still get invitations to take it to places. Like I get an email from Germany saying, bring your pigeons over. And it's, I can, it's a big project to upkeep. As you know, Pete has his birds now. Well, actually he's moved on now. He's not got any rollers at the moment. He's now got white doves, and he's doing funeral releases of white doves, of homers that go home. But you should definitely get him on the show. Actually, he's a real character, a real laugh, and a real wealth of knowledge about the UK pigeon scene as well. He's had them all. He's had fancies, he's had tipplers and rollers and everything. He'd definitely be of interest to talk to.
Anybody that starts off with the nickname Pigeon something, that's a good start right there. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's got your podcast written all over him. Yeah.
When you were doing the 3D printed ones, were you able to come up with some that had different notes on them?
No, to be honest, that was the reason I did the 3D printed ones is I got invited kind of years after the fact to do a show about the Pigeon Whistle project for the BBC. So we made a half an hour radio show for BBC Radio 4, which is like the biggest radio station in the UK. But they only want to follow live. They don't want to do retrospective. And so they want to follow a live process. And so they came to me and said, "We want to do this." And I said, "Well, I'm not really doing it anymore. You know, it was just that one year we did it." And they said, "Oh, well, is there anything you can do?" And I said, "Well, I could try and make 3D printed ones, and you could follow me like on that process, and you know, trying to make that work." And so that's what we did. But because we had quite a tight time frame, and I'd never worked with 3D printing either before, so I kind of get myself in the sims these situations. Similarly with the pigeons in the first place, you know, kind of signing myself up for something that I'm not actually sure I can do. It's quite rudimentary. Again, the 3D printed ones we did. I'm not a I'm not a craftsman and I'm not a 3D designer either. So did I get it to work? Yes. That was the kind of most important thing. And actually there, because this all started off as a project in response to the Pitt Rivers Museum, and it was one of several projects that I did in relation to the collections at the museum. They've actually taken in as part of the collection now various of my homemade and 3D printed whistles as part of their collection.
Oh, that's cool.
And there's actually a display which is on which I curated. So once I looked at it on the display in the cabinets, there's the Chinese whistles, but in the archive in the storage they had a set of Indonesian pigeon whistles, which are very very different construction, completely aesthetically different to the Chinese ones. And I managed to secure some contemporary ones as well from an ethnomusicologist who was working in Indonesia, and they've got these. So the sound is very different. They're more like a referee's whistle. They're high pitched, single tone or dual tone, and they're really shrill and get in your ear. But they paint them like racing cars, and they're like little fiberglass things. And I've also got ones made out of recycled Red Bull cans and resin ones and plastic ones. And so I've donated a selection of those to the museum and curated a display which is still on rotation 6 months a year in the University of Oxford. So if you any of your listeners happen to go to Oxford and go to the Pitt Rivers Museum, you may be able to still see that display of different pigeon whistles from China, Indonesia, and my own ones as well.
That's interesting. I've never heard about the ones from Indonesia. They're not as old going back in the ways like they were in Beijing then. So you're seeing fiberglass and metal.
Well, there are traditional ones, which is part of what I originally found in the Pitt Rivers archives, and they're made out of. I don't really know because it's not something that's documented at all. They're seen as, whereas in China they're recognised as a high art form. In Indonesia, they're seen more as a kind of folk art form that is not really. I haven't found any literature or research about them whatsoever, so I can't find anything about their provenance or how old it is. But I know that the ones in the Pitt Rivers are like at least 100 years old, and they're made out of some kind of thorn or wood, and they're carved. And there's a couple of different designs. There's like a barrel one, which is actually what I based my film canister ones off. They're a kind of simpler design, which was flown on the chest of the pigeon. But there's lots of intriguing questions about pigeon whistles and about sound makers on birds in flight, because I found as part of my research, I found a broadside ballad, which was a broadside ballad is all like from the 1600s, how people would have shared music on the streets. But I found a late broadside ballads. I can't quite remember the date, maybe from 1800s, called the Pigeon, and it talks about tying bells onto a pigeon. And there is and I don't know if you can imagine the kind of. I've actually got one on my keyring in front of me. The kind of classic little pellet bell. There's a theory that it is kind of bells that are tied onto birds of prey and kestrels, and when they fly, they catch the wind a little bit, and you get a very slight whistle. And there's a theory that that was the inspiration for the original pigeon whistles as well. It actually came from
Uh,
bells being flown on pigeons. So that was quite fascinating for me to suddenly find a reference from a few hundred years in the UK of sound makers on pigeons as well. It just says tie bells to your pigeon in the song. I can't remember but there's not a lot of information about why, and it opens possibilities that actually there was more kind of sound making and possibly even whistles going on in England. Who knows back then? In Indonesia, it's still a very, as far as I understand it, like I say, the roots of it are completely undocumented as far as I've found, but the contemporary use of it, it's used kind of as like neighborhood battles between pigeon fancier, who's the loudest, who can paint them the fanciest, and so it's a much more active culture than the one in China, which is in decay, and that's why they're still being made. And they're being made out of these modern materials that I spoke about. I'll include some links as well, and you can see some pictures of these contemporary ones because they're quite fun.
Yeah, and if anybody feels the urge to get creative like Nathaniel here and wants to try making their own, definitely go for it. And even if you have homers, so if you're putting them on Birmingham Rollers, which is a smaller breed too, so I know a lot of people who have homers when they do loft flying, that would be a lot of fun to just put some on some of those birds right there. When you were putting them on the birds, because I know you got to kind of get it around. I kind of struggled a little bit with the one I got off of eBay, and when I was putting those ones on, it wasn't too easy, and I wanted to make sure it didn't fall off, and I lost it when they were out, going a half mile away or something either. Were you guys having trouble with that? Or did you lose any whistles?
Yeah, of course we lost some. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so what you do is you take the two central tail feathers. I mean, this is probably what you did, but I'll just explain it for the listeners. The two central tail feathers, and about a finger length or a finger and a half away from the rump, you tie them together with a thread. And so that basically creates a slot between those two feathers through which the bottom of the whistle, if you imagine, I mean, a lollipop stick, a flat one, like an. In my head, you call them different things in America, in North America, but maybe you don't. I don't know. Do you know what I mean by lollipop stick? Like a flat wooden.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you slide that in this hole that's made between the two feathers, and then that lollipop stick itself has a hole punched through it, and then we just had a clip, like a little round ring clip that we'd put through, and that would secure it underneath, so there's no way it could fall off. Is that what you did yourself?
Yeah, so yeah, mine's same thing. It just had like a key, like a safety key that it would go through on the bottom part, and yeah, it secured against that top part. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. And then the tying part was where I struggled with because the pigeon got wiggly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, but Pete handled that, so yeah, he's so I didn't have to do that, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, it was always it looked really fiddly. But yeah, we lost plenty of whistles. I mean, the worst one was when it was the first presentation of it, public presentation. It was actually on Brighton Beach down in the south of the UK, and the seagulls. So the seagulls, they're really violent, aggressive birds in the UK, at least. They're famous for if you're having your fish and chips on the beach, you have to be careful and kind of keep an eye on the gulls because they can sweep down and they will sweep down and steal your food from you. And they're known for chasing children along the beach and trying to steal their food and things like this. And they're predatory, and what they eat is pigeons. And so they were after our pigeons and they chased one out to sea and we lost it.
Oh no.
Yeah, so we were down by a pigeon, and then a about a week later, I got a phone call from a bowling green. So we have this outdoor bowls in the UK where it's much slower than 10-pin bowling, whatever. But it's yeah, you have this bowling green clubs where you have a grass lawn that you throw bowls out on. And I got a call from the keeper of this green saying, "I think I've got one of your pigeons," and so I had to get the train down to Brighton and pick up this pigeon, and it lived with me in London for a few weeks before I saw Pete again. But we managed to get it back, and the seagull didn't get it. But for a while there was a whistling pigeon, a stray whistling pigeon down on Brighton Beach for a week or so, evaded the seagulls. So it's kind of worse than losing a whistle is to lose a pigeon.
Right, right. So even with all the time that you got to spend with pigeons and that pigeon living with you for that time, you never ended up building a loft and getting a flock for yourself, huh?
I'm sorely tempted. I've just been to And it'd be something I'd do, when I settle down a bit. I just seem to move around too much at the moment. But I always dreamt with there are these tiny doves. You must know them. I don't know what they're called. These miniature little doves, and I always dreamt of having a mini kit that I could release indoors, and with tiny whistles on that I could do indoor gigs with. That's what I'd like to do if given a chance.
Nice. Well, when you do that, we're gonna have to bring you back on and hear how that goes too. An indoor one would be pretty neat. Concerto there. Well, yeah, this has been fascinating. This has been a really good one. And I'll put all the links down at the bottom of the episode. And when this one comes out, I'll also put them on our social medias as well for the videos to your presentations that I found you on Vimeo. And also, if anybody can try to find it, he was on the BBC Radio, and you can find his talk on there as well. Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us. This has really been fun.
No, thanks. It's a pleasure. And I checked out your podcast when you contacted me, and it was really nice to see, because as I said, I had knew nothing about all the different pigeon cultures in the UK, and it was nice to see that the North American cousins using all the same vocabulary and keeping up that animal husbandry and all those traditions alive and keeping it going. It was a really heartwarming.
Thank you for listening to another ad-free, listener-requested episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. If you like the show and want to help it keep it going, as well as supporting your other pigeon promotional work, head to the website PigeonPod, that's pigeonpod.com. You can make a donation there. If you can't make a donation today, support the show by giving us a good 5-star review wherever you're listening to us at right now. That really helps the podcast and helps the algorithm get us out there to other people who might not know about Pigeon Podcast. If you have any episode requests, upcoming pigeon shows, competition results, or you want to be a guest on the show and just talk about some pigeons, or you have a shout out for a friend, shoot us an email at staff@pigeonpod.com. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate your support. And remember, together the hobby thrives. Support each other and enjoy your pigeons.